Okay, here you are, folks. We are on the Fiyah Literary Magazine. Wait, is this our fourth one? Yeah, fourth interview with Somto. The crowd goes wild. Um, yeah, and so I'm just gonna do a quick little intro, and then what I like to do is let the author or artist talk, introduce themselves. I always feel like, yeah, I can like hype you up, but I think it'd be interesting to how you talk about yourself, and so I want to offer that to the world. So my name's Christian. I'm the art director and the social media manager at Fire Literary Magazine. The guest edited issue 28, which is themed on belonging, and we do these author interviews once a month now with superstars like Somto that are just like killing the game, and just a way that I feel like I don't know, maybe like a conversation with other black artists throughout the like digital diaspora. And so I'm gonna pass it over to Sanford to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Somto Ihezue. I am a Nigerian Igbo writer from Nigeria, and I'm also a screenwriter and a filmmaker. Even though I've done like only one film, but there is that. I'm a aspiring editor with Android Press and original fiction manager with Escape Artists, and I mostly write speculative fiction, short stories. So yeah, that's me.
Whoop, whoop. Can you tell us your pronouns?
Yeah, my pronouns are he, him. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks. And also, I forgot to do this, but can you also describe like what you're wearing or like your visual cues?
What I'm wearing right now.
Yeah, yeah, it's just a visual description for the
Okay.
transcript.
Oh, okay. I'm wearing a black shirt, and there's like a lighthouse with the sun around it, and they're like white birds like fluttering around. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty, so speaking of short stories, I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into the most exciting thing. Um, the short story hall at cospass.com. And for everyone who doesn't know, I guess, I asked Somto what's like their favorite story, something they really want to talk about, something they really vibing with, they like. And this is a story they sent over to me. And I agree, it's just amazing. So we can start with that. But my main question is like, why this story? Why did you write whole? And yeah, why at cosmas.com?
Okay. So a funny thing, when I wrote the story because of a team call, and it was Fire's team call. Fire put out a team call for I think it was on the team was something to do with the senses. Yeah, like the five human senses. Something like I can't exactly remember what the team was, but it just navigated that somehow. And I was like, I feel like this is a way I could bring this theme to life. And so I started writing the story, and I think as of then it was the most task. Okay, well, it was the most tasking fantasy story I had written up until that point because I had to do like I hadn't I hadn't really written much up until then. So and just taking on a theme like that, it required me to kind of like develop more on my writing. I had to go like read more stuff, also do like a bunch of research on like the human senses and stuff like that. There's like a bunch of research how it can come across or how one can translate it when writing fiction. So obviously, Fire didn't accept the story, but they sent me a really nice personal notes They really loved it, and they really loved how I navigated scenes, but it wasn't the right fit as at the moment. So I sent it somewhere else with the Cosmos, and it got accepted there. Yeah, that was pretty much why I wrote the story because of the team call. But I just really loved the process of when I was writing the story. It wasn't like the things I've written before. It wasn't like I wouldn't say one dimensional, but it wasn't like a standard straightforward story. I also had to like dig into because I started writing poetry first. So I also had to dig into like my poetic pauses or my poetry bag and like dig up some stuff from there to also use in the story. So I really enjoy that blend of like fiction and poetry in the story. I enjoyed writing those parts, those moments, and I enjoyed writing the whole familial sibling relationship. I'm a big fan of writing stories, family centric stories, siblings, familial love, because I feel like there's a lot of attention on romantic love, and sometimes people tend to forget or sideline familial love, and that can also be a great form of love. Um, we sometimes I don't know. I wouldn't say that everyone gets to experience romantic love, but I think familial love is something that, and it, it mustn't be blood ties. Family could be anybody. Family is where one's heart is, or where one's home is, and I think it's important. I think it's something I feel like everyone should experience that kind of genuine love once in their one lifetime. So I really enjoyed writing that. I really enjoyed writing the sibling relationship, the sibling love. I really love the way it came across in the story. Also digging into like my own relationship with my siblings as well, and just putting stealing a few stuff from how we interact and how we talk to each other, and just putting that down on paper. Yeah.
Okay. So like like I mentioned, it's amazing, and I really do like it. And so, just touching on some of the points you had brought up, particularly, I would start with like the sentences in the language, which I had mentioned to you before. That kind of has like people would sometimes denote this as flowery language, or as you mentioned, like has some poetic elements like that. And I also did notice in the fact, like you said, this is different from at the time the things you had written because I've written maybe like five other pieces, and this was like completely different. Not completely, but it was like a different direction than I played the other pieces. And as I mentioned, I really like the A Girl Is Blood, Spirit and Fire, and the also the other one about the grandma and the young boy, and she was like, this is like boys don't do that, and he was like, boys don't do what, whatever. Like all I seen, these were really cute moments, but like I feel like as you said, this was like something not quite straightforward, like A to B. And I felt like I didn't necessarily know what was going to happen at the end. And then also like how you sort of like subverted that. And it was almost in a way that was like, I don't want to say it was distracting, but it was like, hey, look over here while you're driving, and then you like get to the end, and then it's like, actually, we're running off the fucking road. Like, what I mean? It's like, and it wasn't like you hit it, I guess, or it wasn't like it wasn't there, but I really was like, enjoying like sort of like when you brought in the sort of poetic chapter or paragraphs, and it created a sort of like wave flow a little bit, and so it was kind of, it gave it like a pulse or beat or rhythm or something like that, and it's like you did space it out in a way that kind of gave like stanzas and like made this sort of like rhythm, because it's like woo woo woo, and then we flow, and then woo 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 when we flow, and then like woo 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 we flow. I really appreciate like those well as well too. And I feel like that's like just related to again like these sort of poetic elements in that research that you brought into. And so yeah, I just want to ask any more you want to speak about that, or like it was just the theme that made you sort of like what was the I guess the turning point, or like yeah, because like you said, you write poetry, and then it sounds like you're saying like they're more separate too, like when you write prose and poetry, which I feel like I do that as well, but it seemed like you were like, let me turn that part of my brain on to you. Or I know it doesn't work just like that, but like it was like, let me combine these things a little bit more. And it sounds like it feels like you said, it's just your favorite story. It's like it really shaped up your writing to how you kind of want to see it. I think maybe like more now and in the future is what it sounds like from what you're saying. So yeah, just any thoughts you feel about it, I guess.
I think I was looking for a way to describe the characters, and there's obviously like the normal, the standard way, I guess, of describing characters and stories, and I and because these are not like the because of like the theme I was exploring, they didn't feel like the the I don't know if I should use the word normal. They just didn't feel like the standard characters I was used to writing. I didn't think describing them that same way would work for the story. I just wanted to give the story a sort of a lift, or make it a bit peculiar. And that was the way it's. I didn't set out to actually do it that way. But when I wrote the first paragraph for the first character, and I started out by describing that character. And it just stuck with me like, I should probably do this for all of the characters since I have done this for this. It just kind of made sense that I should continue like doing this. At a particular point, I just like stopped the flow of the story and just dump these characters' personality descriptions, abilities, using this style of writing, this poetic form of writing. And I think obviously, even without it, I think the readers can still kind of pick up from like the rest of the story what these characters are about a bit. If I had put in more content in the story, in the story thread, then it could have still worked without those poetic paragraphs where I was like describing these characters. But I just felt like after I did it with the first character and the very first paragraph of the story, it just worked for me. I just really liked the way it worked. And I said I was going to do it for all of the characters. I would stop somewhere in the story and info dump in the most poetic way possible about each of these siblings or each of these characters. And I just found myself doing it across the story. And those points were actually the most difficult parts to write. Yeah, because it's not um it's not standard storytelling anymore. It's more like mixing the storytelling with poetry. So it was more like prose poetry. So
Oh,
I
that's
had
maybe.
to, yeah, yeah, and I had to like really
I feel like
think
that's a
about
diasporic tradition. Yeah.
I had to like really think about it when I came to those points. I couldn't just write and just tell the story. I had to like think about it. Does this make any sense? Is this working? But by the time I got to like the last character, it came more easily to me. I think for the last character, I did the description at one go. It wasn't something I didn't have to like think about it. I was more in tune with the story at that point. So when it came to using that poetic description to describe them, I just did it at a go. I didn't have to think too much. But at the beginning, it was so much work. It was a struggle to do that at the beginning. But towards the end, I was good to go. Yeah.
That's real. Yeah, I really feel like it gives it that sort of je ne sais quoi that I think, not that if it didn't have it, it wouldn't have been not a good story, but it makes it an elevated story, I think, because of that choice. Like you said, it sort of subverts not only the mythos or like the narrative that's being told, but it also like the type of what is a story by combining these like mixed medium, like poetic, prosy, poetic notions. And I thought that was very like particular and also interesting because I feel like sometimes when I'm writing short stories, I'm pulling that out of my work. More of the like flowy, flowery language or poetic language to kind of make it more concise and obviously to fit the word count. Where I feel like he was able to do it, and it didn't feel like it was like too much or dragging the story down. Like I said, it was able to like and be interjected or like placed or curated in a way that creates a flow, a rhythm. And that's why I was like when I was talking to you before, it was like, oh, this was like kind of inspiring because I was like, I've been like doing like edit mode and pulling so many things out, but like maybe I can like keep some of it in within that sort of short form and it still like not feel like the paragraph is bloated or it's like a romanticism period piece or something like that. Um, so yeah, I just feel like I thought that was a really great example of like putting these puzzle pieces together, even though they're not necessarily from the same puzzle, but like when you step back, it created this image that worked for what you were trying to convey.
Yeah.
And mm,
No, I was going to say that I think that story also like after that for like the next works I started writing, I just found myself throwing poetry everywhere in every story I write. I just I no longer like tend to hold back on putting in flowery sentences. I kind of now appreciate seeing like flowery words, flowery sentences in the fiction I write and the fiction I read as well. And sometimes I, when I'm reading a work and there's this flowery sentence, I have no idea what the author is saying, but I just absolutely just love it because it's just there and it's just very pretty. And same for when I write as well. I always tend to like get to a junction where I'm like, okay, this is reading a bit too plain. Let's throw in something very pretty. And I sometimes I have no idea what it is. I don't even know. If you ask me what does this sentence mean, I think it happened in one of my stories with an editor, and she was like, "What does this mean?" And I was like, "Oh, I have no idea. I just thought it was very pretty," and then she just deleted it.
it was
I
part of the
was
mythos. It all works
yeah.
together.
So yeah, I would say keep all those. I don't know. If you want to keep those flowery sentences, those flowery phrases. I would say just keep it in there, and there will be someone who would appreciate that story so much for it.
Right. No, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. I think sometimes it's like that when you're finding your voice or refining your voice. It's just like what things you may have given up or, yeah, from like when you were a younger writer or coming through your writing sort of like development or whatever. So now that we talked about it a little bit, I was gonna ask you, could you read a short little piece from it?
Yeah, I think I would just oh sorry. I'm just gonna read like the very first paragraph. Where is
I think that works.
it? Okay, so I can just go right.
How about yeah, Somto? You good to go?
Okay, I'll just okay. First was Isi. In the forests of the Judean, the scent of jasmines wafting on a breeze, wrapping the air in a sweetness. The rosemary, the basil, the sage, a cascade of fragrance so sharp it cuts into the morning dew. That was Issy. She was the warm smell of your mother's house, of freshly baked bread, fair trees, and the meadows where the goats once grazed. She was the places you hid as a child, the wardrobes, a tank of tobacco and old smoke trapped in the shelves. And she was more, the colliding aroma of salt and stone as the oceans met the mountains, the stench of bodies stacked after a war, the catching of it all, both consuming, lightning in your nostrils. That was her. Issy was the first bread drum. She was the last, and Abali erased her like she was nothing. Yeah,
Bravo,
that's yeah.
Somto, bravo. Telling you, the crowd is going wild. Like, it's so good. It's so good. Like, honestly, I haven't seen that story, so like when you showed me, I was like, oh, okay. I wonder. I'm always interested in when people feel like is their favorite work or how that resonates with them. But yeah, I see why. And after talking about it, I think it's clear. And one other thing that you mentioned, just so we can um hit it before we move on to the next part. It's like you talked about interrogating kinships and not just necessarily romantic ones, but how like variants of love, like platonic and not, can show up in people's lives. And you're saying the sort of joy or experience of getting a kinship that's not solely romantic and experiencing that, and that's kind of the maybe I would say like the mundane of that is like what you I feel like you show throughout your work. Like I feel like you interrogate how these characters improvise with each other through that relation and through their overall community and goal. And yeah, I was just wondering a little bit, just want to elaborate about I know you talked about people like wanting to like give people that experience, but why is it particularly you write about that type of kinship or your focus? And I'm just thinking about from the pieces that I read, I think that is kind of like a central, I would say a central underline is that it's kinship, platonic relations that are up against like to move the story along. But it's like I don't think it's been. I think the ones that I read, I don't think it was any of them were romantic. I don't think. But yeah, so like, what is that? Is it? I mean, is it like a 100% intentional choice, or are you working through like how these like kinships show up in this sort of like violent world that we contend with? Or are you? Is it like how does like magic or technology shape the ways in which we are related to each other, or we communicate, or we engage in kinship with each other, or all the above? I don't know. These are just some of the things that I think about when you said that.
Um, yeah, I would say that it's. I would say it's just the way I just found myself always um, going back to writing familial ties, and again, not necessarily blood ties. It's just someone you found family in, and at some point, I was like, it became like a thread across most of my works. Um, Seeing people connect with each other outside like the romantic gaze, just with friendship, um, siblings, parents and siblings, and stuff like that. And I just really found I think I really found it interesting, and I think for I don't want to get really personal, but someone like I think even for myself, I feel like the most love or the most connection I've experienced have been outside like the romantic definition of love. It's always been like this kinship with family, with friends, finding family even outside the people I grew up with. And And I think it's very important for to feel, again, different definitions for different folks, but it just feels more important to me than well, romantic ties, which I think is also important. But I feel this, for me, this is more important, having this kind of connection, having this kind of safety, security when talking about like people and people you want to be around, people you want to spend. I think there's this thing people say when you have a platonic soulmate where you're in love with somebody, but platonically, but you still want to spend the rest of your life with them, but platonically. I think it's the most interesting thing. And I think it's something I would like to experience as well. So yeah, I think based on like my own like personal experiences, personal upbringing, my family, we are very, very close knitted. Um, which I think all of that, just like a combination of all of those experiences, this different type of love that is not really glamorized in media, in books. I just found myself putting that into the stories that I'm telling over and over again. Yeah.
That's real. I think, like you said, it is important. I think we live in a sort of like a romantic society, and I like to sort of have interrogations on like the libido economies. So, like, how's our fears and anxieties and desires shaping the way that we perform and engage with folks? And it
Right.
usually gets like a hyper intensification with like the romantic, but it's also in our friends and like our hobbies and the laws and all and how we respond to the morals and the ethics of the world as well too. So I find that like super interesting and thought it worked very well. Like I feel like almost all of the relationships that I read or the examples of kinship, they felt like genuine. Like I believed that these people were in some sort of like honest relationship with each other. Whether that relationship was toxic or whatever the case may have been, but it feels like it was like genuine. I was like it's totally again like believable or like believe that this relationship was real. It's but like I said, the granny thing, I love those ones. I read a lot about the grannies and the favorite grandchild or whatever situation. And to me that was like a super highlight because I like I think it's a common trope too, but it's also just feels like one of my favorite sort of like kinships. I feel like that's a special relationship. And then again, like you said, because the biases or the experiences that we had with our like grandmothers or whoever who raised us and whatnot. Um, and so I think that leads us to the next one. A girl is blood, spirit, and fire, which I feel like is again interrogating friendships, relationships, guilt, and so a really spicy topic, which I was like, okay, we cooking with grease here. I was like, it's time to turn it up. I was like, hey, I was like, I wasn't expecting it, and I think that's what made me like it even more. That it, like, well, okay, the question is, let's talk about that, and then I'd say how you balance like adult or sensitive themes with like a YA sensibility. I would feel like that story like read kind of like YA, but it also had like a grown up sort of vibe to it, like what's that white guy name? Can't think of his name. The Red Rising guy. Can't think of his name. But he has like this trilogy
Yeah.
or maybe 7 books now. I don't know. But they're like YAE. Like there's I thought it was YA until somebody told me that the character is married. And like when you marry people, that means they're not kids in stories no more or something. Or that's how they sell it or something like that. And that was just like I thought that was very interesting, but I would have like died and thought that first trilogy was YA because it felt like you were reading YA, but it was great. I mean, they were having sex, they were dying. It was a lot of stuff happening, so it was actually really adult. But it was interesting, and I'm like that reminded me of your piece a little bit. It was just like it felt like I said, like, but it felt like also when you have like kids or children characters, and then they're written for adult story. So it kind of gave me that vibe too. But I think when I first just went into that story, I was like, oh, this is about to be a cute little YA story, you know, something's gonna
Yeah.
happen, you're gonna get in trouble with a teacher, and whatever, whatever. But I really felt like it was like this thriller and horror elements and dealing with this like really interrogating society and the violence inflicted between people of the same kinship, of same ethnic group, city group, like doctored, relationships, and like also like a larger sphere of the violences that are happening to put this setting into place as well. But yeah, if there's anything you want to talk about that. So I actually really like it. So I did feel like I just talked a lot about it.
Yeah.
My bad. I mean, I'm not trying to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it either. So.
Yeah. I think writing that story was because of like the themes and like you mentioned, like the sensitivity of it. It was very heavy to write. It was a difficult story to tell, really. And yeah, again, like exploring our world and what people go through and how people of the same community, people of the same background can still like inflict injustices or pain or yeah on each other basically. And like just bringing it down to like me being like a boy and how like the PK affects boys and men, it, even though they are like the upholders of the patriarchy, but at the same time, it still comes back around to bite them and stuff like that. Yeah, so I think I found myself trying to write that story with so much respect and with so much care, just finding a way to write it and tell it as I don't know if that's a word, as carefully and as respectfully as I could. And I also really appreciate story. I think I learned that. I think it was one of Nnedi Okorafor's books, where when you're telling a story and there's this like act of violence, or and you're just trying to find a way to tell it, I feel like you can pass across that message or tell that particular point in the story without being graphic about it. It can still be horrifying. It can still be jarring, even without the reader actually reading those lines. And I feel like it's also a way to also protect your readers as well, because you don't know who is reading the story, you don't know who has picked up that book or that particular story. So I feel like it's a way to also protect them when you're reading your work. I remember I read a story, I was reading a story and I just came across like an assault scene and it was the most jarring thing. It was just right there on the page, like every single line. And I had to like reach out to the editor and I was like, could you at least, I don't know. There was no trigger content warning, there was nothing. I just dived into that story like that and I just came across it. And I had to reach out and I was like, because I was friends with the editor. I don't think I would have done that for a random editor, But I was friends with the editor, so that's why I reached out and I mentioned it that this story has very, very strong graphic um, elements, and it will be nice to have like a trigger warning before a reader dives into it. So yeah, so I think it's paramount that for us writers to be able to. And I think it also like really depends on who is telling the story. You cannot necessarily police how people might want to, because some writers write from experience, from their own personal experiences. So we cannot necessarily police how a particular writer would want to tell a story that's connected to them in a certain way. But when we try it, because I feel like this story, if we bring it down to lived reality, it wouldn't be counted as something that was my reality. There are people who have these realities here in Nigeria, across Africa, which is one of the things that also like made me want to also tell the story as well. There are people who go through those acts of violence. And because it's not my lived experience, my lived reality, that prompted me to be able to tell the story as with dignity, as with respect and with sensitivity to people who have lived those experiences. Yeah. So again, if again, it depends on who is writing the story, who is telling the story, who is the voice of the story. And I think I appreciated the way I wrapped up the story. We got to see this character, um, the defiance, and then just the uprising and all of that, how it just rounded up on the community, the kinship between all the girls, all the characters, them just coming together, them rebelling basically. And I it really touched me, even though I wasn't wanted in the story. I think that point in the story really touched me, them coming together. And I was also really grateful for the people who better read the story before it came out. And they were really, really helpful in how, with the flow of the story, where wasn't working, where was working. And I'm just really grateful for how the story just wrapped up and how like it just the flow of it and how it just even though it wasn't the ending wasn't like a definite end, which people have said I do with all my stories, that it's there is no definite end to it. I just kind of stop halfway or something.
Oh my god, I feel like I think because I like slice of life, I tend to do the same thing. Like it
Yeah,
always feel like something else could happen later on, but I don't
really.
like it. I don't know. I like I feel what you're saying. I didn't think it was bad. I liked it, but I'm biased because again I do it too.
I personally just like end it. It's not something I do intentionally. It just feels like an end to me. And I see how it could read as not an end to another to a reader. I definitely see that. I'm not trying to gaslight them into thinking what they are thinking is not true. It's true that it doesn't look like a definite end, but it does look like an end to me, but could also continue if one chooses. I find myself actually continuing, like, even when I read works that aren't mine, when I read other writers and when the story, if I really enjoy the work or a book, I tend to continue writing someone's story in my head. I just like keep on writing your story because I really enjoyed it and I don't want it to end. So I write a sequel of your story in my head. And um, yeah, I also do it with my own writing as well. I do not intend to write a sequel to these stories, but I find myself thinking about them and just like, oh, if I was to do something, this is how it would go. Yeah.
I think that's real too. I think that makes perfect sense. I think it was this mangaka. He does his most famous one is called Claymore. Um, and I can't think of his name right now. And I feel like if I pronounce it, it's going to be a hot mess. So the main point of that it is that the in Claymore the story ends and but there's a war happening literally. But we don't get into the war. Our story we just stick there. And he said the reason why he ended it like that and didn't go into the rest of the world stories because that's not the story he was telling. It was like
Right.
there's always going to be plenty of stories to tell. It's a whole world that you built and made. But our story was with these girls on this, well, not to ruin it, but yeah, on this place. And so it kind of reminds me of what you're saying. It's like, and that's kind of how I think about slice of life or just like some of my work as well. It's like, this is the wrap up of like this season or this episode or something. But I always feel like I'm like, there's a possibility for something else to exist. And I feel like that a lot with short stories. I feel like that's how I'm always thinking about, especially more recently, because I read the Nisi Shaw's essay in response to, what was it, 2004 or something? I don't know. People are being racist, like the regular stuff, but they had all came out on Fireside and did some like essays or whatnot. And she mentioned how, oof, I'm so bad with names, but some guy had told her, told them at Clarion that you're supposed to write a whole bunch of short stories within a universe, and Nisi was saying that people usually kind of like take like they don't want that from black authors. They want like different types of black stories or something like that, and that just wasn't an option for them to partake in. Is to write multiple short stories in this one universe and then sell it as a short story collection, which is the advice that the guy gave to them. And I don't know, I kind of like that idea. I feel like it's cute a little bit. Like it feels like it helps me with world building, but it's also like, okay, if I could do like two short stories and maybe a novelette or something. That I mean, you don't have to be more than that, but it's like it kind of evolves into a little ecosystem. And I just been trying to play with that, but yeah, I feel like that kind of lends to my endings as well. It's like I feel like it ends, but like you said, it's like, but I mean, it's a definite. I feel like it's definite because the story ended. This story from point A to point B that you were going to tell, but it's just doesn't make it not an ending because it's a continuation could be possible. And so I think I
Right.
could stick with that. It's like if you say it's not, well, if you ended it, the god of the piece, but then it's like the people want more. It's like, well, yes, I think that's the point too. But I just find that with indies that's always like a really contentious point. It's just like, does this like wrap up in a satisfying way? And then since that's satisfying and so subjective, I think that's why we're able to do it in like, so many different variations. And I feel like the slice of life ending situation. That's what I'm calling it because like I love slice of life, I guess too. But I know some, to have a more stricter story, people like a beginning, middle, end sort of situation. And yeah, I think I don't know. Also, I'm thinking about that in like conversation with the beginning too, a little bit, because I felt very strong about having a strong beginning, and I felt like I think that's like really important. And not that like a open ended like ending isn't strong, but I guess I'm um, struggling with the word definite or definitive, like that definition around like that sort of ending sort of situation. But yeah, I just thought about that a little bit. Like I do put a lot of emphasis in the ending, but I feel like I'm more lenient on closed and open endings of my own writing and other writings. But I'm like more hardcore on it being like a strong opening, which I
Right.
just realized like I'm like even if it's a slow burn, I think I'm still kind of like if I don't know what's going on in the first two pages, I'm like, I don't know, babe. It's kind of, but yeah. But it's like if I don't know what's gonna happen, at the last page, it's like they get on the train and ride off. It could be the ending. You know what I mean? It's like that could be satisfying. Where it's like if we're on the train at the beginning, it's like, what the hell are we doing here? So yeah, no, I really like that though. Like I said, something. I think
But I
that's so
think,
important and
yeah,
just show your intentionality and the purposefulness of curating this like this niche ecosystem to tell I feel like these sort of like a tale that's beyond like you in the present and also just I think as well how you relate it to like the mythos and the magic of it. I felt that like that
right,
was very like just like very like right there because it shows how I feel like there's no like there's violence like we live in an atmosphere of violence and even that while it can be pleasurable or feels good or feels right, that it doesn't mean that it's not violent to people. And
right,
how like black people like suffer sort of. And I feel like this is a Christian ontology thing, but like it's the suffering that has to happen for you to
right,
achieve be better or you gotta work all this harder or build your resume, all this other type of stuff like that to sort of like
True.
mold and
Yeah.
turn yourself into sellable or whatever. And I feel like that it was like playing with these things here like that. And like I said, it's such like very YA. I was like, I could have seen them like going. I mean, they didn't have video games, but I could see them going in their room and playing like video games or like crushing on some like random boy or something, you know, or something like that, or writing their diary or something. It had like those sort of like the aura or like air about it, but then it was like we're really dealing with some like very serious topics, and kind of really reminded me too of like Fledgling with Butler about putting those like juxtapositions like right in people's face, like it's all this assumption that kids or children or younger people can't like deal or understand these like violence or complex things like that, and it's just I feel like you really interrogated how the like positionality of a child within the kinship or kinships and how that works with between each other and adults. And I feel like that was just like even with the grandma piece, I feel like that was very interesting about like how you explore kinships within the pieces is not just like as you were saying, kinships matter or like the focus on having a kinship for the sake of a kinship, but this is a vehicle to show Black people within these like neo fantasy worlds or science fiction worlds and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's, I'm just want to give you more props, but like that's just kind of like what I see that was happening within that. And yeah, I just think it's cool. Like I said, I mean, I don't know. I feel like you spoke about it. Like it's hard to talk about it without giving it away too. That's what I was also thinking about it in my head
I
while I'm
think
like
what
speaking. I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't want to say
yeah,
this because this is a good part to me. Like this is the part that I feel like, you know, so it's like this is an interesting try now. Sometimes with the book, it's a little bit easier because like you can talk about a little piece of a book and then it's like obviously you got the rest of the book. But I feel like with the short story, it's like it's like that pilot episode. You almost
right.
can't give too you know nothing away because it all matters for what that is going to be. But yeah, I guess if you don't have anything else about that story, like I don't want to overtalk it.
Yeah.
Hopefully read it and then like engage with it more than just like you know. I feel like you convinced me already to read it again. So
No, I think what I find interesting from what you're saying about this, because I don't think I've had like an in-depth discussion about it with anybody really. And you mentioning that going into it thought you were going into something like that, something YA, something cute, and that was really not my intention. To me, it felt like the entire story was from the start to the finish had like a serious theme. Well, had like the seriousness of it spread across. But now that you mentioned it, and I'm thinking about it again, I actually see that the first few pages came across a bit, well, in quotes, cute. And so
it's
when,
it's not
yeah,
it's the girl they hanging out before it gets serious. Like
yeah,
it gets serious, but it's like right when you set the scene, it just feels like I don't know. I just feel like I would be able to turn that on TV and it could be like it could be Wings Club. It could be the you know the girl groups that are like
yeah,
magical and figuring themselves out and how and like I said, just critique on gender that was happening there. And also I really like appreciate the interrogation about how even like adhering to gender, there's still violence is inflicted upon you. Like
right,
and so to me that I mean, I'm not like a huge self-determination person, but it gives leeway or it gives expansion to what does it mean to make yourself in the world when the world sees you as such. And so
right,
how does even if you're not yourself but you're still adhering that it's still violent. And so I think that was something that was interesting because it's like they want this. They want to be these people. This is what it means to be this type of person.
right,
This is the honor or privilege. This is like all they know. This is like, you know, God said, let there be light. And it's just like, what does it mean to really like tackle that? Like, so like, and sometimes you can't because it's like you can't even really imagine not like what you know, your ontology. Like I was talking about your ontological anxieties. Like you're really able to like tease these things and perpetuate how these characters um, are like being forced to improvised. Like it's like yeah, they're making decisions, but how much is their decision? Like how much of their class or race or gender status is affecting how they're navigating? And yeah, I just feel like these like when you have those like communities, those kinships, it really creates this sort of like triangulation because it's not solely rested on this one character now, but how they fit within the community and the community fits within the larger sphere of things. Um, Again, bravo. That's all. In short, I think it's like, but also I like stuff like to me. I that was like, I mean, it's still PG-13, so it was like that. I'm I'm just into. I think sometimes even I feel like all black people write horror. Like I don't think even if it's not horror, I just so I always feel like that tent is there like metaphysically.
Yeah.
So this was that's also I think a little bit to me why it's like I don't really feel like it's super like the heaviness is like just the tone of it. It's just like what the topic like called for. And I'm also attracted to that. So yeah, I don't think it would like hyper change the mood. Like I said, it got serious, but I felt like it still was an ease to that seriousness. It still was like you said, it wasn't necessarily gory. Even the scene of when it happened. Like you just it reminds me also of Toni Morris, you know, when she talks about doing sex scenes. He's just kind of like sometimes you just got to give it to them. You don't just get it over with. Don't draw it out. Don't turn it into a whole
Yeah.
spectacle. And I feel like that, like when you did that there, that was like what that was. It was just like I'm gonna give you this degree of violence, but I'm not gonna like make it the centerfold, and I'm not gonna like
Yeah.
put my characters or character in more pain than they would have to be in to make this known as like what's happening here. And I thought that's why I mean in terms of like because I feel like if it was adult, we might have it might have been more graphic. Or
Yeah.
even if it didn't show it, it might have been just the lead up to it might have been more graphic or the intensity of it, or even the outcome. You know, it was like an adult sort of like dynamic that happens from the outcome of that. But I feel like, yeah, if it was adult, we might have been there when it happened, and the person might have saw it happen. Like, you know what I mean? It's like instead of like, oh, I was there, and then the next thing you know, it happened, sort of situation. But no, so that's why to me, I was like saying some a little bit about the YA is like how the character came into some of like the info and like in the visualize, it's like sneaking to just, like see something like to be a child to like come into an information until your time was coming as well. So it was like and I was like I feel like a lot of things like you like a kid would like open the door and like if someone's getting in trouble or peek through a window or you know like you're watching porn or something or you got the cover over the thing. It was just like any old way to sort of like it felt like the show that they didn't have as much agency, even though they were like self-determined to be who they were within that story. Like she was sneaking, still reading like illegal, you know, stuff and like making that to how she showed up in her community at that moment. But yeah, I think all of those are just like it's just like the way you chose you like pick and choose. I feel like certain elements too that showed up a little bit stronger, and it just reminds me of like popular YA sometimes, like when they use thriller or horror elements to convey these like tension points. Like from like just even the most popular, like Susan Collins, and not saying it's like Susan Collins or like you know the other ones, but that sort of like thing that came popular. I'm thinking also the Maze Runner a little bit. Like I said, it's not like that, but it was still
Yeah.
YA. It still had that tension and those thriller elements, but like it still was like, okay, I kidnapped a bunch of kids and threw them in a box. You know, it's like
Right.
he still did it in a way that was like, I know this is like wild, but like this is actually wilder when
Yeah.
you really get to like see how insidious and like hateful these people are of kids and the people, and all that other type of stuff for the name of like being human or being whatever. And I just feel like, yeah, some of your like the short stories, and like which makes me super interested about something longer. So just like if folks don't know, you know, congrats to Somto because you got like signed. And so hopefully, you know, there should be a book coming. That's usually what happens. I don't know. That's usually I'm not like saying I'm trying to be a fortune teller, but
Yeah.
this is like
Uh,
that
yeah,
I've
I
seen.
guess that's what's expected, or less. Yeah. So I I feel like I mostly don't even have a choice again because like um I not like I'm being ungrateful or anything, but since it happened, it feels like I'm kind of like on a clock. Because any time maybe I like being on Twitter. So whenever I tweet something, and then my agent comes and likes the tweet, it feels like they're threatening
You're
me. Like,
watching me.
where is where
Oh,
is the
like you
stuff I
gotta get an
can
alt
do
count.
something?
You gotta get a hidden account.
Where is the stuff you're supposed to send me? We haven't sent it yet. Yeah, I I am hopeful that I will be able to. I think it's very scary. I found myself being a bit scared or a bit. Sorry, my dog likes to scream randomly. Um, yeah, so I found it a bit. I think I've come to a point where I find it a bit like daunting or a bit scary taking on such because I think writing a full length work or writing like a book, it's no easy feat. And I see a lot of people having to give up so much, having to give up writing short stories, having to give up like editing or take some time off from social media. I know like a ton of people who have to do all of that stuff to be able to put out a full length work or a book. And it's I think I've just not found a way to reconcile it. Like having to give up social media, having to stop writing short stories. And then I'm also like working with Android Press and editing people's full length works. And how do I do that as well? How do I stop working here? And I can't because I really have like work that I have already made commitments towards. So it's all of that stuff. It's just a combination of those things. And yeah, it scares me. Like, how do I deliver at the end of the day? But I just feel like it's something I will have to do. I have to figure it out one way or the other. I have to figure out how to make like this balance or this shift to be able to keep doing what I'm doing or find space, make space for um taking on this new task, this new goal, while also doing the things I was doing before. Because I feel like unlike the normal route of getting like an agent, I didn't get one because I had work ready or like a full a manuscript ready or something like that. It was not that wasn't how I got one, so it was a bit different. So now, unlike, oh, I already have a manuscript that I just give to my agent starts. Now it feels like my agent is actually waiting for me to deliver on what I said I can deliver. So it's yeah, I have that, yeah, something like that. So it's a whole thing.
That's wrong. It reminds
Yeah,
me of I think the quote is "Do it scared" or something like that. I
yeah,
mean, like,
exactly,
yeah, I've been learning that
exactly.
it's like all about adjusting. Like, okay, I can do this like this now. That may not be what I can do in 6 months, but being open to being like flexible on how you can do things. And yeah, I think it's a juggling act for sure. I don't know. I've like even now I feel like thinking about like you hearing you talk about it. It's the all the things that I'm giving up or gave up to like make sure I can get up at like 5 a.m. to write before my day start or pay for like the classes and workshops and stuff like that. Like all the other like sort of sacrifice. And it's like, okay, yeah, I want this, but then it's like, well, I'm not going out or I'm not doing other things, which is like I guess there'll always be time to go out and stuff like that. I don't know. I have this thing, and maybe it's also like a psychosis or whatever, but it's just kind of like I'm writing like I'm gonna die tomorrow. And not that I actually think I'm gonna die tomorrow, but it's like it's just like I feel like I have to like I don't know. I feel like thinking about like you got all the time in the world for something to happen. You're like gonna run out before you know it, or something, something can happen when there's like it's not possible. And so it's like, wow, it just feels like that urgency gives, I don't know, it gives the work something. Like it makes it feel, I don't know. And it just kind of remind me what you were talking about that. Like it could be daunting. It could be like it's anxiety inducing, but it's also like this is what I guess how I've been called here to do. This is like what I'm like how I'm coming into play. And I mean, I always feel like sacrifices got to be made, but like you
Right.
said, like you can decide which ones do you choose, and how do you just kind of like mitigate the grief of like having to sacrifice something or sacrifice things, and or like change because like that change is already happening anyway. So who's something well, a year ago before it's like not there now, and what's gonna be. So I think that's all pretty dope. I'm super excited for you. Like I feel like I told you, you're a rising star. We were just watching you shoot up in the sky. Okay, so you mentioned some other things, which I think, okay, we could shift to about editing. And so I'm just gonna, this other question is like, do you have a preference either for editing or writing speculative fiction?
Um, yeah, I think definitely the writing part because the writing part kind of like opened me up to the editing part of it. Well, I think I've really found myself like appreciating editing or like just working on someone else's work and trying to just polish it because most often than not the work is already brilliant. So it's just you're not trying to make the work brilliant, you're just trying to make it um and what word clean or more polished.
Yeah,
Because
sellable. I like to think
yeah,
sellable. So.
yeah, yeah, sellable. And it can be I'm currently editing this nonfiction SFW anthology with Nisi Shaw and Jrinin. And it's been really great. It's and you get the experience because Nisi is like super experienced. And then Jrinin does so much work with Choreo magazine. And you just see them and it's so like the experience and what they have to offer, what the investments they put into these stories. And it's I have been editing before, but they are doing it on a whole different level, and it's been a learning experience. So much learning for me, even towards my own work as well. And but that's for like short nonfiction, so you can compare it. It's when you're talking about editing full length works, manuscripts, novels, and collections. That's a whole different ballgame. That can be um, yeah, I found that to be super tasking uh, because sometimes a work might come across and there's oftentimes it's not you that gets to say, oh, I want to edit that. I've had experiences with it, and it's always like, do you want to look at this? And you're like, sure. And then, so it can be, yeah, full length work. It can be something editing. For I think it's also been a learning experience for me, for my own writing and for my own editing as well. Just trying to get a story to a level where you think where both you and the author are comfortable with that story getting to. And there's so with full length works, there's so many moving pieces, especially when it comes to the editing part of it. It again, and it's not your work, so you have to at the end of the day, the idea belongs to the author. So you are an aid. You cannot, it's what the author wants to achieve at the end of the day. That's where the goal is. Everything is like it's the author's vision that you as the editor you have to follow. You have to align your expectations. It has to align with the author's vision and where the author is going to. And I think that's very important. And I think authors should be able to stick to where the vision they have in mind, but putting down that story so it doesn't get lost in like the editing process. Yeah. And sometimes some works come in and you're like good to go. It's just brilliant. I remember I worked a work with Randa Garcia, and it was the most brilliant piece of. It was a novella. It was so good, and the editing was just me gushing in the comments and about how much I love it. And I was mostly just being a fangirl in the comments of the story. I'm like, oh wow, I picked up on that, and then maybe someone does something. I'm like, yeah, I called that. I knew that was going to happen. So it was just me basically just I ended up just having like this cute conversation in the comments of the story during the editorial process. It was the most lovely thing. I really enjoyed that story. I wasn't editing the story. It was more like I was just enjoying reading. I was just privileged to be like one of the first people to read the story. I didn't do any much editing, I have to be honest with you. It was so good and it was so refined, so polished. I said I was going to ask Rhonda, but I feel like she might have given that story to another editor first and they had worked on it before it came to us because it was so polished. It was so brilliant. But oftentimes you don't always get work like that. Sometimes you also get work that will really require extensive, massive editing, and that's where you get really tested. Because with that the other kind of work, it's easy. Oh, it goes and then you guys are done and you guys just talk about it. But with work that's stories that still need work, that's where your editing skills get tested and you really have to show out and show up. I don't know if that's a phrase. And try the best that you can to make sure everything is in place, all the moving pieces are moving accordingly, and just try to fix, mend, polish, and get something that's, like you said, sellable, presentable out for the public to look at. Yeah.
That's real. I feel like I resonate a lot with that when I did the issue with Fiyah. It was just like I had a story from Chaos Walker, and it was just like it like literally jumped out of a slush pile at me. I I didn't feel like I had to even really do much. It was just like I just knew once I read it, this had to go in here, and I knew it was gonna. I knew it. I just knew it. And then there was other ones that was like, not what I thought. I feel like was interesting is like from the Much Reader or the Choir editor, they moved it up, and then their opinion on the story kind of changed me or changed my mind about that. And it was like, I don't know if I would have picked it by myself. I honestly don't. But I felt like what I trusted the person that passed it up and respected their opinion and what they saw in the story too. And so I
Right.
think that was just like an interesting thing. Like, is it really tested me because it was like, it's not as like, yeah, I believe in this story and this author, but it's also like I believe in this editor and like what they see in work that I feel like doesn't get out and that speaks to the theme. And yeah, it was a lot. I was like, oh, wow, I'm like gonna pull my hair out. And like I just felt like I was going through. I was like, I know all deadlines are like dramatic, but baby, I was like, y'all taking me through the you're trying to be, and I was like, I feel like everything was happening in my life, and I was like, this is very dramatic. And I was like, just calm
Yeah.
down. I feel like maybe in my mind I was probably making it more, but it was just like it was intense, and it was very interesting. Like you were saying, each author has their own voice
Right.
and sort of like making suggestions, but like not forcing or like putting the author in like a box and like not just only doing like what you would see, but what you feel like enhances the work. And I feel like I'm always doing that with suggestions. It was like I feel like this piece is if it's like something where it's like here's an example of like maybe how you can try it or what could work like that, or like let's play around with this sort of thing. And I think this has been interesting in seeing either the pushback or non-pushback. Like sometimes a story, I was like, maybe we should add breaks in here, and maybe we should be a clear indicator like who's this character and who's not this character to support the breaks. And they was like, oh, that worked, and I was like, maybe you should take out, you know. like one of these like 9 characters in this short fiction. And it was hell no, I'm not doing that. All of these characters matter, and stuff like that. And so it was just like I was like, no, he was like, oh, you want to just cut it down. I mean, eventually we worked it down a little bit, but it was just
Yeah,
like people have strong like author voices, and it's not like
yeah,
I'm always like, this is not a fight. This is not us fighting. This is like I may make some like wild suggestions, but I'm always gonna try to like push you to be like the best I think it could be, or like I don't think
true,
it to me like say show up and show out. There's no point in me even reading this if I'm not gonna like give you like what I have to offer. It'd be
true.
like remiss of me just to give you partial like half of it. And so I thought that was just very interesting as to like who am I and like how I sort of communicate and work with people, how people have worked with me before, and then how this sort of like work with other people. And then like just that relationship or that kinship outside of that submission call. And now it's still some of the people I work with now, and they're just like, I don't know. I feel like it's been positive. It was a good experience. I think that's part of the editorship too. It's not that I got you paid and got your work out, but like like you're interested in showing me more work, or we interested in like maybe writing together, or just exploring different options. Like if you come into mind, I could reach out to you, or vice versa. And so I just felt like that was an interesting way to I think be with like other writers. Whereas like it's not just like working together to write together or work on something. Like um it was like you submitted something, we worked on the piece, like you said, to elevate it, and then now it's going live and we're putting it out there in the world and like the awards and trying to whatever, all that other stuff that goes into that sort of situation. It was very interesting. I didn't know what it was like before I did it and just the process and it don't seem like it's that quick. But when you're doing a submission call for a quarterly mag, it's like 3 months. The
Right.
submission clause comes out, you get the stories, you got to edit. They come out on digital, and the preview goes out, and then it's out. It's like, and then I was just like, the people who do like 6 to 12 issues a year, I don't know how. It seems like you said, I would have to give up I had to give up more to commit myself to that, and I just thought that was just like a very I won't say humbling moment, but like contextualize like what it really is that I say I want to do. Like, oh yeah, cool. I made one like my own speculative fiction magazine or whatever, whatever. But like, what does that really like take to have? And not just like money or people dedicated to like read stories, but it's a business and there's a whole shabam to like navigate that and still also be like an I feel like how Fiyah is. This feels like I just feel like there's just been like a good example around. Well, I guess I'm part of Fiyah too, but there's been a good example around. But before I came, I was just like, this is a good example of like us. I think what like they like live their mission sort of situation, and like and some of the basic things is just like they're open to support and like Black writers throughout the diaspora. And I think they keep it really simple with that as well. And I think that allows like this thing to happen, and also the NSS and also the different like relationships that kind of micro blossom out of this larger going, almost 10 years now of building this community and working um across the world, which is like, it's just so wild that this one I don't know if it's the only magazine I think that accepts Black people. Like, I think that's the only stipulation is that you're Black.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think so.
know, but I think it's like within like I think it's only like 2 or 3 that only like the condition is that you're Black and speculative. And what does that mean? You know what I mean? Or like, what is it like when we know that like the percentage is low about who gets published and don't, who makes it through the slush, who doesn't, who actually gets published in long form or not, and like what does these like overall racial social constructs like how they play in media in terms of like the imagination of like Black people within science fiction and fantasy. It's like, oh, I can get it when their skin is blue or they're apes, but as soon as it's Black people, it's like, what? This is
Yeah,
what for other stupid stuff, and it's just like, oh, but you love the Titanic, but you can't get this. And so I think it's like really interesting, some like how this sort of balance is happening within this speculative fiction world. Like I feel like to me, the one of the most like powerful things about the speculative is to interrogate the mundane, and it's there
Right.
where we raise the level for maybe everyone that can't see, and which I feel like some of your work does, or I would use like examples to do this because this is also my theorization. But this is violent. We live in an atmosphere of violent, and we're making. I mean, some people through like objection, they have self determination, or there's these pockets or niche moments of like I'm not a huge like joy person, but it's like happiness or like you said, this kinship, this family, this foundness, this sometimes sovereignty, which I think is controversial, but you have these moments. And I just found that so interesting about like Black folks, like out of all the things that's going on in our lives in the world, and niche and like across like the whole like Western order, it's like we still like write stories, or like people still like fall in love, or like I don't know, go to concerts and shit. It just seems so wild. I mean, I know like okay, yeah, not just like I have to have a distraction or I have to have an outlet, but it's like the scale of the world is so I think so severe in a way that it just seems like it's like the red pill, blue pill. Like it's like whoa, you kind of get introduced into like how class or race sort of like is structured geopolitically, and it's just like that could be I feel like daunting and overwhelming, and it's almost like somehow, or not just in spite of, but like it's just like we still find ways to like again write stories to have this. Somehow we took time to talk for an hour and 30 minutes about fiction during the current state of the world. It feels so wild to me at the same time, but also feels like imperative or important, and especially what I feel like with the sort of like Wakanda ization of Africa, and then with this recent sort of revitalization of Afrofuturism. I feel like it's getting maybe generic and like Black Panther y, and that equates to Happy Africa in some sense like that. And I feel like that's what a lot of work is being marketed and supported and like directed towards that direction. And so I've just been thinking about those things, and I feel like that's like sort of interesting. And I think this would go to like the other questions like about representation, especially as like I feel like a writer and an author. Just like, what are your thoughts about that? Or yeah,
Oh, yeah, I think just writing from where I'm writing from, and telling the stories I'm telling, like when just even getting into the space, I don't think it would have been possible if not for like spaces like Fire. I think I also mentioned this before in our discussion. If not for spaces like when I got into at first when I was like, well, I want to write stuff like this, and then we look up um, places that publish speculative fiction. And I think I came across a few of them, the popular ones, and just looking at the stories, I was like, okay, maybe no, maybe the, this is not the space for me, because like the name of the author, and then you read the story, kind of just this is the story is by a white person, and then you look at all the stories there in that publication, in that magazine, and that I think at that point I kind of left the writing space entirely, because I got like, okay, no, I left the speculative. I didn't bother like continuing, or I think even starting. I was supposed to start, so I didn't bother with that anymore. So I went into like poetry and just writing like Nigerian magazines and the magazines over here. When I returned back to like the speculative space, and I came across basically magazine like Fire, and that was when I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is for me. This space in general has space for me somewhere in it. And if not for spaces like that, I probably, if I didn't know that there is a space like that, like, or like a door like this, open to writers like me writing from wherever in the world, as long as you're a Black author, there is that space for you. And I think it's very important. It's very key to like a lot of authors, to a lot of marginalized authors, Black authors, to know that these things are possible. I think I remember even like back when I was in uni, hearing about things like the Nebula Awards, the Hugo Awards. They felt like this. It felt like they were happening in space, like they were giving these awards on a spaceship on Mars. It didn't feel like anything remotely possible that I could even be or exist in the same vicinity as these things, these bodies, these awards. Um, and I think until I saw Nigerians getting awards like that, I'm like, oh wow, so it's remotely even possible. If a Nigerian could get, even think it was like Nedi Okara for and some other authors as well. If it's even remotely possible for like a Nigerian or Black person to get to a space like this, to a recognition like this, then it's possible for every single one of us. So I think that's what representation does really. It's it makes you believe that this thing, this far-fetched thing, is possible. Just like when the Disney films, and then there a lot of young girls would never believe that they could be princesses or see themselves in media. But with representation, we got like the Little Mermaid, which one of the twins did, Chloe Haley Bailey, and you saw a lot of young girls who now believe that, oh, if if she can be a princess, if she can be on TV, then so can I. And I think it's very key. I think it's very important. And I think we need to have more spaces catering to like, we need to have more spaces for underrepresented writers, writers of color, queer writers, Black writers. It just needs to happen. And it's just going to be like this ripple effect, and it's just going to go around. Or I think what really saddens me about it is that just like living in here in Nigeria, it's bad with like representation and all of that stuff. And I think what the writing community has mostly done for me is that it has given me like a bubble. I've been able to exist in this bubble outside of like the harsh reality of what is outside of my immediate environment. Because yeah, it's basically just a bubble for me. Sometimes I even
That's
forget
real.
I'm in that. Yeah, I
I
sometimes I
resonate
forget.
with that. I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah,
before I found Fire, I was like, I don't want to say I was gonna give up, but I think I was taking a different approach. I was not considering short fiction. I was like, I'm a novelist. I don't do
right,
that, which I do over there. I wasn't even thinking about any of the magazines. And it was like the same thing. I found out about I was doing some research on Delaney and Butler, and I found out they went to Clarion, and then they got Hugo's and stuff like that. And so I was like someone I was like, oh, I can do that. And when I got to the fire thing, it was just like I promise you, I wish I could like bring my ex in here because I would be like, I told you, like I saw it and I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but like I gotta be a part of it. This is like what I've always been like wanting to do, or whatever the case may be, whatever dramatic.
right,
And I mean, not to say I'm psychic, but it happened. And it's like you were saying, and now that we've been nominated for, it's so weird because it feels regular now. I think it's my third time about the group that we've been nominated for a Hugo for the finals. And it's like if you would have told me
right,
that before, I would have never believed that I would have been a part of like it, or people are even like into like sort of the things that I'm trying to bring forth. Like I almost didn't even apply to even get in. Like it was just like I had so much doubt about it. And no, it's been so warm and with Elle and like Brent and obviously Devon and just our whole little team. It's just been like, I mean, they're the OGs. I feel like more experienced, and then we have a lot of like, I call it junior staff. I mean, not technically, but We have a lot of people who only have like a couple of things published or who started to like edit more and publish. So it's like they've been very supportive of us with like trying new things, trying to push in like I wouldn't say like a new age of Fiyah, but like what does it look like to continue on if not the original members aren't a part of it and things like that. And so I think we have like just Devon left, who's like was like an OG member, and so everyone else is left. And so I think we just thinking about that like legacy again, and how do we also increase the possibility of one more Black writers getting published. If we know Fiyah only does 4 issues, you know, 6, 7 writers an issue, 2, 3 poems. I think like what does that look like as a community or substantive? I don't know. Not say what that looks like. It's like, yeah, let's all launch a mag or something. But it's just, I think about that all the time about how we how we interrogating this or how we like and not just being like a reactive or responsive. Like yes, there's a disparity, but like we already know just only being like responsive to the disparity doesn't work. So like you can have one Black slash reader, but that don't mean Black stories are getting through. You have like one Black editor, you have a Black editor, but doesn't mean you know it's like it's all these things in play that are systematic as well, not just like who show up. So
Yeah.
I agree. I think the little pocket of joys that we've been able to carve out has been like I'm telling you, I've been writing short stories. I've been writing more poetry. Like I had stopped writing poetry for a minute because when I was an undergrad, it was like you got to choose to be a writer or a poet, and I was like, but I do both. And they was like, that's not a real writer.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
and so I had to choose like am I to go under the English like writing track with creative writing as a focus instead of the poetry track, whatever. And so then I've gotten back into it because we've been in these everyone's writing not everyone's writing speculative short I mean poetry, but there's a lot of people writing in a little sphere writing speculative poetry. And so that's been interesting just to like you said, be exposed to it and then find my way back into exploring what that looks like. Oh, our time is we this happened. Somto, this happened so quick. See, we gotta talk again. I'm gonna ask you. This is the last question I ask everybody, because obviously we're gonna have you back when you debut. But yeah, what would you say to yourself in the future when we bring you back to talk about your book? So I'm gonna play it when I have you back. We're gonna watch it. So
um, I would say, I would say, you didn't have to think about it that much. You just had to just do it. Like all that time, just overthinking it, over analyzing it, and just yeah, you just had to do it afraid, and just get it over with. Yeah, I don't know if that's like good advice, if that's very comforting, but that should work for future me.
I think it does. It's set the mood right now. Actually, I want to do one more. I'm sorry, I just realized that. I didn't ask you, do you have anything coming out soon? I think that's also very important.
Yeah, I think I have like a short story coming out with Beneath Ceaseless Skies. It
Okay.
should be, yeah, I think it should be coming out maybe next month. And then the anthology we're dating with Nisi, we're supposed to like, it's coming out like the pieces are coming out online, one after the other, but we're supposed to like curate it into like a single anthology. I think it
Mhm.
comes out in October. Yeah. And I'm doing an anthology with Solaris, but we haven't really announced that one yet. So yeah, that's basically mostly
Busy,
it.
busy, busy.
Uh, I'm
I'm
just
here
hoping
for
like
it.
it's
I
all over
stand
with.
something.
Yeah.
I'm getting my Somto fan club shirt. I've
Ah,
seen them on Twitter, so I'm not gonna go for like the president. I'm just gonna go for a fan club because they're
yeah.
wild.
No.
Sansa, I just want to say thank you so much for even just like being bothered with us and like coming to chat and talk shit and like talk about your stories and how amazing you are. Like I'm blown away, honestly. It's just like
Thank you so much. This was so much fun, and I really appreciate being here and being a part of this.
yeah. We can talk some more soon. It's gonna be on YouTube soon, but yeah, this is it, folks. I should do a little ending, but thanks for coming to the or thanks for watching. I guess they're gonna watch it on YouTube. LOL. Thanks for watching the Literary Magazine interview with Santo. Um, Cool. Let me cut this
Yeah.
off. I'm so bad at this part. Where is the? Oh, did it stop? Oh,